Good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Eager, and for those of you who don't know, I'm chair of the Kent branch BCS, and I'd like to welcome, particularly remotely, Hampshire branch, Dorset branch, and BCS Women Specialist Group. I'd like to thank Canterbury Christ Church University for the Edge Hub for our splendid venue, and to BCS who are paying for the refreshments. If you are parked and you parked on the road, that's fine. You can park in the red car park, which is the one near the main entrance on gate 4. Do not use the car park up behind this building because it gets closed before we finish. Yeah, well, we might not finish by then, yes. So people stand around talking and they've been called. No food or drink in here. Maybe you know that. I think that's okay. The presentation is roughly from now for about up to an hour, but it depends. And questions afterwards, and then if you want to hang around and talk, that's fine. We are recording it. The only recording is they're the actual speaker and the Zoom gallery. If you don't want your picture at all, then you can hide yourself in the gallery by turning video off. And then the BCS will all edit this recording to put a nice title on it and everything else. If you've got any questions, keep them till the end. You can put them in the chat if you're on Zoom. And that's all really. Just to say the speaker is Christina Eager. I won't say a lot about her because she can say it herself, but she is passionate particularly about computer science education and the associated issues around diversity, access to computing and so on. She's got research publications examining the reasons girls and women are underrepresented. The first one I know of it personally is 1990, I think. That'll be it, yes, in Australia. But it's mainly about the UK here. That's all I've got to say, so I'll let her get on with it. Please.
Thank you. Good, I'm going to say good evening, but I think some of you might be overseas, so good whatever time of day it is for you. And welcome. Yeah, computer science education and why don't girls do computer science? It has been a bit of a bee in the bonnet for a number of years. And I hope to kind of go through some of the facts and some of the evidence that we've got at the moment. This is not a complete picture, because the complete picture is really complicated and lots of different factors involved in this. But briefly, before I got into education, I was a developer, worked as a programmer, team leader, all sorts, working in lovely, lovely COBOL and then somewhat less lovely C, and then other languages came along after that. So that's me. I will say, though, that when I started as a programmer, I didn't know girls weren't able to do computer science. I never noticed that. There were 8 programmers and 6 were female, and I thought that was perfectly normal. And it was only later that I started thinking that, why am I the only female in this room thing? So things have changed. So let's have a look at some UK data. First off, 25% of employees working in tech, that's the whole tech sector, that's not just computer science. It's been worse. 21% of GCSE computer science entries are female. 15% of A-level computer science entries. To be fair, not all schools teach GCSE computer science or A-level computer science. Strangely, if you go to an all-girls school, you have less chance of doing computer science GCSE than if you go to an all-boys school. Don't know about the mixed schools yet. 21% of applicants for undergraduate computer science and 15% of computing academics are female. I have to say at Christ Church we are back in the trend because we're near a 50%, 40 plus most of the time. So you can see that out of this kind of global industry, and in the UK in particular, there's a bit of a problem. But then, maybe it's not a problem. There's this thing called a leaky pipeline, which is always, when you talk about careers, there's this idea of a pipeline. I'm waving my hands around, sorry for the people who can't see me. There's this idea of a pipeline where you have this fixed progression from graduation to first job to second job, all the way through to some very high level of management. Pipeline about keeping people in. But the thing about pipelines is they also keep people out. Yeah? It's not just about keeping the oil in the pipe, it's about keeping the mud out. Yeah? And so pipeline can work both ways. But does it matter? Who cares? Why does it matter? That 94% of UK employers think there's not enough computer science talent. Obviously, there's an economic hit there. The evidence is that teams and companies with diverse workforce, dare I say even the word or the phrase EDI, are actually more profitable for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that diverse teams are less likely to overlook sectors of society. Yeah? If you've got a non-diverse team, in whichever way they're not diverse, they are not going to necessarily think about people who are not like them. And we can see this in a number of ways. I'll show you. For example, I know it's a crash test dummy, right?
Yeah.
Until recently, there was no such thing as a female structured crash test dummy. And those that claimed to be female tended not to be female, but small male. And of course, we know physiologically men and women are different and therefore respond differently in car crashes, which means that a lot of women were getting injured in ways that men weren't. VR headset. Maybe a couple of years now ago, we had some money for buying VR equipment. And so we got loads of people to come in and bring their headsets and bring their kit. And as a bunch of staff and students, and there were a lot of us, we descended on this kit and we tried it all out. And we found that some kit didn't adjust. Either it didn't adjust at all or it didn't adjust small enough to fit a female head. When the female head that it doesn't adjust small enough to fit is the person with their finger on the budget, that could be a bit of an issue. And indeed it was an issue for some manufacturers. And PPE. And I'm sure there are lots of female people who will appreciate that sometimes it just doesn't flipping fit. Yeah? If you get it big enough to go across that part of your anatomy, then chances are the sleeves are well past the end of your fingers and you're tripping over the bottoms of the legs all the time. Yeah? Because funny enough, men and women are a different shape, but it only comes, or most of it only comes in male shape, which is not helpful. And, there's always an and, but there's not a but on this one. We've got growth in engineering. Yeah? So there's more roles, but there's no one to fill them. So a lot of those are going to go vacant. Just to the point where there's stars, there's references, they're in the notes. Anybody who wants the PowerPoint can grab the notes as well. Microsoft. In 2023, they said 149 million new jobs in software by the end of this year. That's over 2 years. They're talking about that kind of growth. But there's already a shortage. So who's going to fill those jobs? Yeah? If we don't get people who are not represented in the workforce into that workforce, who's going to do those jobs? And then if you get women into the workforce, they don't stay. They leak, as the phrase might be, out of the pipeline, which is a bit of a nuisance, really, because, you know, they invest all that time and energy, skills, developing their abilities, all those things, and then gone. Why would that be? This is a different question, right? So, why? Now we come into the kind of crux of it. I mean, that was just like your preamble, setting the scene, as it were. Lots and lots of theories as to why girls don't do computer science. And one of the most prevalent ones is that one. Now, there have been several studies done that show that even very tiny babies, boys and girls, react differently to certain stimuli, which is kind of interesting. But, and my students will know there's always a but. Yeah, there are differences, but we don't know if they mean anything. Yeah? All sorts of studies, and the general consensus is, yeah, it's different, but does it make a difference? Yeah? We seriously don't know. And of course, rather strangely, as the technology improves, as we get better at things like MRI and the rest of it, more differences, and we know less. Yeah? When it was just a case of, oh, well, men's heads are bigger, their brains are bigger, they must be better at it. That was like kind of received wisdom. And now it's, well, hang on a minute, that's not necessarily the case, but we don't really know. There is this thing, however, called neuroplasticity. So basically, your life changes your brain. Think about learning things. Yeah? If you learn a language, for example, that's not the language that you grew up speaking, yeah, at the beginning, it's very, very difficult. There's a lot of things to remember, and it can be a real struggle. And then the more you practice it, the better you get. The easier it becomes, the more natural it becomes. That's because your brain is changing. You're building little new pathways and connecting things up in different ways and putting more in there, obviously. Yeah? And that applies to an awful lot of things. So your experience and your learning early in your life will affect your ability to do things later in your life. It will change the way your brain works. And obviously for young people, their brain is a bit more flexible, if that's the word, than for older people, ancient people like me. But of course, the other thing is, does it matter if girls' brains don't work like that? Because a lot of the skills that you need in computing are things that girls are rather supposed to be good at, like attention to detail, like talking to people, communicating clearly, writing, organising things, ticking all the boxes, making sure all the ducks are lined up, however you want to phrase it. So why don't girls do computing? Last one. Socialisation. In other words, the things that happen to you when you are growing up. A lot of factors in here. Things like family circumstance, where you live, how you live, what your parents do for a job, whether you're the oldest child or the youngest child, all sorts of factors in this. And the kind of social expectations that the people around you have of you. There's been quite a lot of research recently from America looking at bias within families, and that some families are what they call boy biased. In other words, the boys are more important than the girls, and the impact that has on the girls' maths ability. But there are other things. Family influence. You are more likely to enter computing if a family member is already in computing. I mean, it's not just computing. We all know those families where every other one of them's a teacher, or every other one of them works in medicine. Yeah? It's not just computing. But of course, you tend to do the gender divide. Think about how that works. So that girls tend to follow mum's footsteps and boys tend to follow dad's footsteps. Well, if mum's in computing, that's unusual. Yeah? So in one sense, we know we're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now notice I use the word tend, right? It's a tendency. It is not everybody does it kind of thing. Peer pressure at school, when you're choosing your GCSE options. Oh no, you want to do this with me because then we can be together and we can do this and that and this thing. Yeah? Your friends will influence you or try to. Yeah? So they will say, well, no, actually, that's not really appropriate for you because, and then, you know, peer pressure is a big, big thing, isn't it? And very influential. And it's easy to give in to that if you're perhaps not quite so sure. We all know that. We've had that experience, though I'm not saying that we've all given into it. Safety in numbers. Translating those numbers of GCSE entries into per class, you're talking about 2 or 3 people per class. 2 or 3 people, girls per class. Yeah? In a group of, say, 30, there might be 3, 6 maximum girls. Do you think that might feel a bit threatening? There's all these boys, you know, you're like 14 years old and you've just chosen a subject and there's like 3 or 4 of you and 20 plus boys. It's a bit scary, isn't it? If you can imagine that. So there's a certain element of, well, I don't want to be the only girl in the class or the only one of 2 girls, and I don't like that one. So I won't pick computer science. I'll pick something else where there's more girls or where my friends are going. There's that kind of influence as well. Because people don't want to be the only whatever it is in the class. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of nothing particular about girls. That's just how it is, isn't it? You see very few boys being confident enough, for example, to do GCSE food tech. There are some. They have the bee in their bonnet. Perhaps they want to be chefs. Yeah, but there's that thing of being other in the classroom. And this gaming. I'll come back to gaming later. But it's fairly commonly understood, whether accurate or not, that actually girls who do gaming have a pretty hard time. And that a lot of the problems they get is not from the difficulty of the game, but from the other gamers, especially the male gamers. And if you are old enough, you might remember Gamergate, which was a big thing a few years back. And I'll come back to the gaming thing in a bit. But those are all kinds of things around socialisation. But of course, there are other things that cause us to, you know, perceive roles and perceive things perhaps in ways that may not be 100% accurate. So I'm going to share some advertisements with you. I'm not going to say whose advertisements there are. No copyright notices. Yeah. There's a real computing advert from a real computer company. What kind of man owns his own computer? The pictures of Benjamin Franklin, by the way. The most original use of an apple since Adam. Don't see where Eve quite comes into that one, to be fair. I thought she was the one with the apple, but I could be wrong about that. That's a nice picture, isn't it? Male person using a computer while female person stands at the back looking pretty and doing something with food. Slightly less, if you like, extreme, but still, hack. Hackers are bad people, right? That's the understanding of, yeah, where we're at with that use of the word now, did used to be. So there you go. They're encouraging you to be something that perhaps girls are trained not to be. Black tie. Do females wear black ties? Correct. So, although these adverts, I mean, you can see the kind of time span by looking at the pictures, you know, the size and shape of the computer, right? Although they're not kind of directly saying girls can't do computers, what do you think the impact of that is going to be on someone who's just going about their daily business? And those on billboards, they come up in newspapers and all those things. Things that they see. What do you reckon? Have a think about that. I say that a lot, don't I? Have a think about that. Right. Gaming. I had fun with this one. Gaming and gamers. There is some evidence that girls as gamers get treated very badly, mainly by other gamers. And I've got a nice quote for you in a minute. But let's have a look at what that means. Right, you can see that's a hyperlink. So I'm going to click on it. Look at these images of gamers.
I'm not seeing that.
Are you not?
No, because I think it's a different screen you have to share.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I'll tell the people who are online who can't see what's on there. Basically, it links to just an ordinary search for computer gamers. And most of the images that come up are of males. Basically, dark colours, males. And I suspect a lot of these other ones won't work either. This is the quote. The majority of it was guys talking, you know what, because they were furious about being destroyed by some player who might be a girl. Now, it's kind of commonly suspected that a lot of girls who are gaming online take on male-sounding or gender-neutral names and avatars because of the response of many male gamers. This link here, I'll show the people who are in the room. Apologies to those people who are not. This is a search for gaming stuff for boys, Amazon. Yeah, lots of dark colours, black, purple, red. There's also one for girls' stuff. Lots of pink. Seriously, the first thing you see is a pink chair. And then there are other things that have got, apparently, ears on them. Yeah? See, look, ears. And that are designed to look cute, apparently. So there's that. If anybody wants to download the links, they're welcome to. And that is an actual quote from a study about gaming and sexism in gaming. Yeah. One of the issues that female identified gamers get is not just the aggression, but also the sexually explicit comments and pictures of people's anatomy that perhaps they would rather not wish to see. So, why else do girls do computing? Boring. Now, I'm kind of assuming that if you're here listening to me rabbiting on, you don't think computing is boring. Yeah? But apparently it's boring. Yeah? Maybe not. It's not perceived as being relevant for girls. That's what girls are saying. Yeah? It's not fun. This is feedback from girls, remember? They're not good at it. That's an interesting one. Yeah? And the social and artistic aspects are not emphasised. This is interesting. For those of you who are not familiar, there's a thing in the UK called the Millennium Cohort Study, which is a longitudinal study of people who were born, millennials. And one of the things that the study did, information link in the PowerPoint, was look at career aspirations between boys and girls to see if they were any different. And boys and girls were given a load of careers, and at this point they were looking at gender and they were looking at ethnicity. And they were told, right, here's a load of careers, which ones do you fancy? Which ones would you like to be? Which career would you like to pursue? All boys, regardless of ethnicity, included either engineering or software development in their career choices. Even including those ones who said, I want to go and play football for Manchester City. All boys, regardless of ethnicity, included one of those two in their choices. Yeah? Most boys included both. Right? No girls included both, regardless of ethnicity. Yeah? It was not a choice for girls. Girls are not interested in it. Girls are not good at it. And that goes across year groups. Yeah? If you look at year 10 to 13, part of this research, so for those of people who are not familiar with the system, years 10 to 13 is roughly 15 to 18, 15 to 19. 53% of male students said they were good or fairly good at computing. And 33% said they were good at computing or fairly good. Yeah? And of course, one of the issues with that is that if you think you're good at something, you're confident at it. Make sense? And there is some research that suggests that teachers respond to confidence in students. Yeah? So the confident student will get more attention, more support, more encouragement to try new things, whereas the not so confident student will be not give that kind of encouragement. And of course, that brings us to the next thing. If girls are not interested, is this the problem? Is it actually the reason that girls are not interested in computing is because actually the way it's taught in schools isn't as good as it might be? First off, we know, along with everything else, there is a lack of qualified computer science teachers. For the UK, in 2023, 60%, so more than half, are not qualified in computer science. They do not have a qualification in computer science beyond A level. I'll just leave that there. You can think about that one. Because once we start talking about that, we're long gone. And they'll be throwing us out because it'll be midnight. Yeah? Quite often, where you've got a computer science teacher who is actually any good, they're a scarce resource. Yeah? So possibly they can only teach one GCSE class. Because there's not a lot of them around anyway. And some universities have closed their computer science PGCE courses because they haven't had enough applicants. Yeah. So where do you put that teacher's time? A lot of schools put it with the more stereotypically girly subjects. The most common, as far as I can tell from the data, we're talking 2015, 2016, I've not finished analysing yet, but the most common match-up for computer science in an option block at GCSE is textiles. Now then, think about that one. Right. So we haven't got any teachers, they're not qualified. Maybe the quality of teaching isn't quite, or maybe the breadth of the quality of teaching. The evidence suggests that a lot of people who are now teaching computer science used to be teaching IT, which is a completely different subject. And just because they were teaching IT didn't mean they were IT trained. There was a large tendency for like geographers to be bludgeoned or persuaded into teaching IT because, well, you use spreadsheets, don't you? Yeah. There is that perception that geographers, mathematicians can teach IT, and then, of course, they get to teach computing because IT was taken out of the curriculum in 2015. Open a computer science book with pictures in it. Pictures, not diagrams. Look at the pictures. Pick a computer science book. You are free to pick any computer science book you like. Guess what? I'll leave that one there. Yeah? There are issues. But also, computer science is perceived as being difficult. Yeah? It is more difficult to get an A or an A star at GCSE in computer science than in many other subjects, not saying most other subjects. Yeah? So, current data, again, not finished munching this, but it's 2016 data. An A star in computing, less than 6% of people who took that GCSE got an A star. On average, 12.65%. So it's perceived as being more difficult. So schools possibly are quite selective about who they permit to do computer science. Would it be that confident kid? Or would it be that quieter kid who's not quite sure but wouldn't mind giving it a go? What do you reckon? Unless the timetable's bogey. Obviously, in the UK, schools do need to follow national curriculum. Everybody has to do English, maths, and one science. because that's a requirement. But beyond that, there's more choice. And it is hard. See, I'm getting so interested, I'm forgetting to click the button. Right. This is a thing. Right? We don't need to know who Mary Coombs is, really, but this is just typical of the kind of thing that comes up. I'll show you the quote. I'll put the red in myself. Did anybody ask Steve Jobs? Bill Gates? That question? Did anybody suggest that that might be a thing? Did Alan Sugar have that question asked? This is the killer, or at least for me, this is the killer, and I would admit to bias here, right? This was part of information provided at a special exhibition of women in computing. When do we think that might have been considered an appropriate thing to say? We're talking 60s, 70s? Well, it's part of a bigger exhibition on women and science. Who do you think might have said something like that? And when do you think they might have said it? I'll tell you. Click. Oh, come on. There. They did that. They said that. When did they say that? And I just saw that and I went, really? Yeah. Even the Science Museum. Yeah. So that's interesting. Finally, because I know I've got half an eye on the clock, just one more thing. We talk about socialisation, or I was talking about socialisation, and images and how they become part of your consciousness. The Gina Davis Institute is based in California, and they do a lot of work about women in media, particularly things around whether women are adequately represented, whether they get equal speaking parts, whether they get represented as scientists or just the hangers-on, things like that. And they've done a lot of stuff, obviously, about American media. And of course, in the UK, we do consume a lot of American media, films and all the rest of it. So I thought, let's have a look and see what a computer scientist looks like. What American media that we consume think computer scientists look like. Here's the guy from Jurassic Park. You know the one who stole the egg? That one, him. Very attractive, manly type, no? What about them? Any good? Office space. Not really attractive work environment, is it? Would you want to work with those? Not sure I would. I mean, they might be lovely people, but look at the posters. All those, they're computer scientists, apparently. Yeah. That's my favourite. Not only is he a computer scientist, he gets to save the world and he gets to go. Independence Day. So I thought, let us look for a female computer scientist. I found one. One. Thank you, chaps, ladies, gentlemen, happy smiling people, and the rest of you who are just sitting there going, what? Yeah, any questions?
What do we do about it?
Oh, cleverer people than I've worked on that one and not come up with an answer. I don't know. It's a simple answer. I'm just, at the moment, just saying, here's what the problem is. Might have a better answer for you in a couple of years. when I've crunched the data and looked at it in different ways and shapes and forms. But at the moment, difficult. There are initiatives. I mean, if you look at something, for instance, like Tech Up Women, do fantastic stuff, but they are of necessity small scale. I mean, in terms of the problem, 50 women a year coming into computing is not going to make much difference to the thing when there's the numbers. You know, the numbers are huge. So whilst, you know, those individual initiatives are really good, they're just like top of the iceberg. Any questions from online?
There's some comments, but what I'll do is I'll get the chat afterwards, and we'll put the chat up on the website as well.
Yeah.
Anonymised. But if there are any more questions from the floor, you'll have to repeat them so that people online can hear them.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you think this has happened? Because in my experience, and I've been in computing for 50 years, up until about 1983, I would have said that there were more women in computing than there were men.
Okay. Right. So for those people online, the question is why, and that up to about 1983, there were more women in computing than there were men. There were when I started.
Yeah.
One of the issues, this is my opinion, I'm not stating it as fact, PCs.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You saw the adverts.
Three people.
Boys' toys.
3 people. BBC, because of the BBC Micro.
Yep.
Bill Gates and IBM.
Yep.
They're responsible for it, because up until then, there was a really good mixture of male and female in the computing department. But after that, it changed.
Yeah. Another factor in that is not just availability of PCs, but also people knew more about computing generally. So whereas nobody really knew about computing, they didn't really understand what programming was, they'd never done any, which meant that by and large, and I'm generalising here, girls and boys knew equally little, and everybody thought, oh yeah, it's maths related. So more girls would be going into that because more girls go into maths and maths related careers. Once you find out that it's not, and you know a bit about it, and then you get the adverts, and then you get the teaching and all the rest of it. I mean, I never saw a computer until I got to university. You know, then it becomes a different kind of, it's not a mystery anymore. And then it becomes a bit more. I think the other issue may well be that there are more career paths now available to girls. So they've got more choice. And this is a thing that you tend to see, from countries where they have had a totalitarian government, and then they're coming out of that into a more democratised government, because the government no longer tells you where you will work. You get the choice. And I think once the choice factor starts getting involved, then there's all sorts of pressures that are different then. Interestingly enough, I understand that in India, quite a lot of the programming workforce is female. But my understanding is that they only get as far as junior roles. They very seldom make it beyond that. And one of the reasons that, so I'm told, computing is a popular subject for girls in India and other regions around is that you can meet a better class of husband. Yeah? That, you are then mixing with, intelligent, educated, well-paid people. But that's just,
Yeah, anecdotal.
Yeah, any other?
Yeah, that's an interesting point about India. So where I work, we use Indian contract companies like Tata and Infosys quite extensively. And the percentage of women working for those organisations is far, far higher than internal,
Mm.
where, in Sandwich, there's maybe less than 10% of the IT workforce are women. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you just place that for the...
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the comment was that actually the experience of working with contracted out staff in India would suggest that actually, yes, in India there are more girls and women working in the IT workforce, whereas locally it's about 10%. Any more questions? No?
Hang on.
Oh, hang on. Maybe?
Just a comment here, which hopefully people can hear, from somebody who said, I am from India and I was the only girl in my computing class. In workforce, very few women progressed to senior leadership roles.
Yes. So
Probably
junior
got that
roles.
okay.
Yeah.
That's in the chat anyway. Come on down.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Feel free afterwards to come and, one who are not online, come and get some coffee and tea afterwards and have a chat. Thank you to everyone online as well. Yes, my microphone wasn't working today and I had to find out why. And that means the floor microphone wasn't working either because they're mixed together. So we had to do things like that. Interesting point, actually, just in passing, that Tina said that when she went to university, she hadn't seen a computer before. I met her about 2 months later, and she didn't get into computing until several years later. And by that time it was too late, she'd already met me, and so she didn't get a better class husband. There we are. Okay, thank you everyone online. Thanks for coming. We've got a meeting next month on, I think it's the 6th, whatever the Thursday is. It's on the website of May, and that's with a joint one with the Association for Project Management, who are coming down for the first time, and they're going to talk about what can computers actually do for us, basically. Why do we need them? So that's quite interesting, I think. The speaker is apparently very good. So we hope to see you then. Thank you very much.